Hey friends, Ashley and Chris here, CTX Advantage Group. Look, we're here talking about the NAR settlement. And look, we are getting a lot of questions from both buyers and sellers. So we're going to cover this in a couple of different videos. So Chris, we're going to handle your specialty, the buyer side. So let's talk about what this NAR, and for those of you who don't know, NAR is the National Association of Realtors. There was a class action lawsuit brought on the NAR, stipulating or rather stating that sellers were having to pay commissions that ultimately they didn't want to pay, or they felt like they were railroaded into it. So we're going to break that down a little bit, talk about what has come from the settlement since the settlement was approved on both sides now. There have been some practical changes to the way we're doing business. And we're going to dispel some of the myths on the buy side and hopefully help you kind of parse whatever you're hearing out there through videos or the news and really break it down on a local level here in Austin, what you're going to expect from us on the buy side. And honestly, what we're ultimately seeing is that there's not a massive amount of change because of most of the things that are stipulated we've always been doing. So let's break it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like anything else. There have been some misconceptions out there, so we'll spend a little time talking about those as well. But practically speaking, the changes that are affecting the buyers, there is always going to be required a buyer agency agreement now. It's something that we have always practiced. All of our clients have always signed buyer rep agreements with us. It's something that is now required before showing a house. So if you're talking to an agent and the agent tells you they need a buyer rep before showing you a house, they're being truthful.
Absolutely.
The other thing is that the buyer agent compensation, it has to be objective and ascertainable. It's not an open-ended thing. We cannot write in the buyer rep agreement whatever the seller is going to pay, that's what we'll accept. Now, we can talk about that more later about how that affects you, but that is a fact. It has to be written into the agreement. Those compensations offers from the seller actually cannot be listed in the MLS either. That is a big change, wouldn't you say?
That's the biggest change, right? I mean, ultimately, what the settlement is trying to create here is a more fair and balanced system so that, if there are agents out there who are trying to steer their clients towards the higher compensated listings and not showing the ones that say offer a discounted rate or discounted compensation or almost no compensation, and there may have been some agents that were steering away from those. And so this system, this new requirement is designed to avoid that, so that we can't search it on the MLS. You're not going to find it in any kind of database. What does that mean we have to do, though, on the buy side if we're representing? I mean, what happens?
I mean, we're making phone calls, which is a good thing. It's something that we've always done anyways. We've always felt that relationships with the other side is important. And in this case now, we have to make a phone call to see what that compensation offer is, which really kind of leads to the next point, that we cannot receive compensation that exceeds the amount in the agreement. And really all that means is that there's going to be transparency, and I think that's a great thing. And practically speaking, if we have an agreement that says that we're going to receive 3% on the buyer side, and there is a seller that's offering 4%, then there has to be transparency. We actually have to come back to you, the client, and let you know that the seller's offering that bonus, and there would be an amendment to our agreement. And so there's nothing fishy going on, nothing secretive, and it has an opportunity for everyone in the transaction to feel comfortable about what's going on. The last thing that really affects the buyers is, in the past, you may have heard agents say, "Hey, I'm free to you. I'm working for free," and that is actually verbiage that an agent should not be using, and in my opinion, never should have used. What we always said was that we're going to do everything we can to make sure that our services don't cost you money, that the seller will compensate us. And that's how it's typically gone, but it's never been required, and it's never been something that always has to be that way. But you do want to be leery of anyone who is saying my services are free, because let's face it, none of us are going to work for free, right?
Nobody's going to work for free, and ultimately this new settlement agreement is put into law the fact that if you're going to say my services are free, then you cannot receive any compensation of
Correct.
any kind, regardless of whether or not the other side is providing compensation. So the word free is not going to be batted around in the real estate game anymore. So that should be helpful and a lot less misleading to those of you who are out there on the buy side.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is regional. I think in other parts of the country there has been a lot more stuff that's kind of happened behind the scenes where buyers and sellers really didn't know where the money was coming from or what each person was getting paid. Where I feel like here in Texas, we've been a little bit more transparent, and all this is going to do is to make sure that all agents are doing those things that we should have been doing all along, and giving you all the information that you need to make a decision. We're still going to be your fiduciary. That is our number one goal in every transaction. And so I'm not really worried about these changes. I don't think that they're really going to affect you as the buyer. And I honestly, besides paperwork and just making sure we've got our T's crossed and our I's dotted, I don't think it's really going to affect us too much. What do you think?
It really shouldn't. Again, because we've always practiced the way the stipulations are now coming from this settlement, it doesn't change the way we do business. The paperwork will look different. We'll obviously have to have some conversations about a buyer rep agreement earlier. But beyond that, we don't anticipate this is going to change a lot. There may be some sellers out there that take this news, or even you buyers may take this news as, well, the seller's never going to pay anymore. Now I have to figure out a way to pay my buyer's agent for the fiduciary they're going to be. In reality, this is not stipulated in this agreement at all. Nothing says that a seller cannot pay compensation. What kind of questions have you received from buyers in this process this early on? I mean, we're only 2 weeks, two and a half weeks out from this.
It's only been 2 weeks, but people have known it's been coming, and so I've been fielding questions really all year, ever since it hit the news. And one of the biggest questions I get is, okay, if we sign an agreement with you and that you're getting 3%, what if the seller's only paying 2.5%? What then? Do I have to bring the other 0.5%? Which is a great question, but honestly a question that we've gotten in the past, even before this settlement. And so the reality is, we can't speak for everyone, but for us, our number one goal and priority, again, is to be your fiduciary and to take care of you and treat you like family. And so if we find ourselves in a situation to where we need to have a conversation about compensation, even after that agreement has been signed, we will. And those agreements can be amended. That's a possibility, wouldn't you say?
It is. But ultimately, what you need to know is we're going to be your fiduciary, and we're not going to ask you to write a giant check at the end of the process. That's never been our goal, and we will always make sure that we're taking care of you on the fiduciary side and on the buy side, just like we would mom or dad.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole goal. Do we have any wrap-ups, any other myths that we feel like we need to address for our viewers?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I would say is, and this is true of anything, just make sure that you're doing your research and you're asking the right people the right questions. It's really easy to see a headline on the news that says something like, "Gone are the days of 6% commission," or "Sellers are going to make way more money on their house now that they don't have to pay buyer's agents." And it's easy to kind of go into a panic mode as a buyer, especially for those of you who may be first-time buyers and you don't have a lot of cash. You begin to panic a little bit and think, well, how am I ever going to buy a home if I have to write a check to a realtor? And that's why I think it's really important to just make sure that you surround yourselves with the right people and ask those questions to people that you know and trust. Hopefully we can become those people for you if we're not already. For a lot of people watching this, I believe that we probably are. And so, I would say don't panic ever. Always pick up the phone, give us a call, and let us talk you through it, because the reality is it's never as bad as what it actually seems.
Exactly. Well, that's it for the buy side. Stay tuned. We're going to put out another video very shortly that will talk about the selling side. And so if you've got a home to sell and you have questions about this NAR settlement, absolutely get ready. We're going to dive in deep on the sell side, what the myths are, how dispelling some of those myths, and what kind of questions we're getting.